Good evening. This is Richard Coble, President, Northampton Institution for Savings.
Добрый вечер, Państwo. Good evening. I'm Frank Knight. Welcome to Polka. And tonight we're especially pleased to announce that this entire half hour is being presented through the courtesy of the Northampton Institution for Savings and Dick Corbel, who's the president up there. Some mighty fine people. On the bandstand tonight, our mighty fine orchestra. Greet, if you will, from Hadley, Massachusetts, Stanley Kozera and his Knights of Melody. The music of Stanley Kozera and his Knights of Melody and some fancy accordion playing by Henry Jagodowski, the pretty blonde polka. Gee, I once knew a pretty blonde who had a beautiful mink coat. She spent 6 weeks showing it to her friends and explaining it to her parents. But it was gorgeous. I'll explain that to you, Stanley. Here's the Around the World polka. Stanley Kozera. Kozera from Hadley, Massachusetts, and his famous Night Civility Orchestra with the alarm clock, Polka. The alarm clock polka, and Freddie on the drums, you're 2 seconds off there. The alarm clock. Gee, that reminds me, last year I took my entire family over to visit Poland, and we went to Zakopane. Everybody said, if you want some wood carving, just go to Zakopane, which is the southernmost Polish city. And this is where all the wood carvers are, and everything that you want in wood carving you'll find there. So we went down there, and my wife saw this beautifully carved clock, and she bought it. She paid $150 for it. And I got pretty mad. And you should see the clock, however. It chimes on the quarter hour and the half hour, and every hour a little bird comes out of the top of the clock and describes my wife. Here's a happy-go-lucky operatic, Stanley Kozera. The Northampton Institution for Savings is presenting this entire half hour of Polka for your listening and viewing enjoyment, featuring the music of Stanley Kozera and his Knights of Melody from Hadley, Massachusetts. Each and every week, there's a different orchestra on our bandstand. Next week, it'll be Connecticut Stosh and his orchestra from Bristol, Connecticut, and they'll be talking about the Harvest Moon Ball, which this year will be held at the Bristol Arena in Bristol, Connecticut. He'll have some news about that. If you would like to come up and attend any of our television broadcasts, all you have to do is write for the tickets, which are absolutely free. Write to Polka Tickets, WHYN-TV, 1300 Liberty Street, Springfield, Massachusetts. When you write, don't forget to include a stamped, self-addressed envelope. Request as many of the tickets as you want. They're free. We'll put them into your stamped, self-addressed envelope and mail them right back to you. Then you'll be able to come up, sit at the tables, wait for the waitress to come around, as these people are doing here, for the Gołąbkis and the Pierogis. Or get up and dance to the music of one of the area's top bands, like Connecticut Stosh, next week. Be back with Stanley Kozera and the Knights of Melody in just a minute. That was the Philadelphia Polka that featured Henry Barron on clarinet. And, of course, you recognize the maestro, Pan Stanley Kozera, who is on the violin. He's the guy in the coat which has all the threads around the collar and pockets. Oh, well, that's his Columbus Day coat. And that's what we're observing today, Columbus Day. Columbus Day. That's a great American holiday to celebrate a noted Italian navigator who on Spanish ships sailed to Haiti, San Salvador, and discovered the New World. That's what we observe today. Here's a medley of waltzes. It's music by Stanley Kozera's Knights of Melody. This entire half hour, you know, is being presented tonight through the courtesy of Dick Koval, who's the president of NIS, the Northampton Institution for Savings. You know Dick Koval, don't you?
Very well.
Stanley Kozera. Did you know that he threw me out of the Christmas club?
Did he?
Yeah, I wasn't coming to the meetings.
I don't believe it.
Is the Henry K. Overic. With the music of Stanley Kozera and his Knights of Melody from Hadley, Massachusetts, brought to you by NIS, Northampton Institution for Savings. This is Frank Knight, hoping you'll join us next week for Connecticut Stash and his orchestra. Until then, from all of us here to all of you there, so long, good night, dobranoc from Polka!